Has the recording been started successfully?
Yes.
It being 7 p.m., we'll call to order this meeting of the Town Council. The first item of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting on June 4th.
Might I interrupt? Wait a minute, before you do that, could you please do a roll call so the record shows who's in attendance?
Sorry. A roll call of the councilors present. Councilor Anderson.
Anderson present.
Councilor Golombeski.
Golombeski present.
Councilor Mataronis.
Mataronis here.
Councilor Moore.
Moore present.
Councilor Mushin is present. All five are here. A quorum is established.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then approval of the minutes of June 4th is the next item for consideration.
Motion to approve the June 4th, 2020 Town Council meeting, unless anybody has any questions or comments on it, correction.
Moore second.
The motion is made by Mataronis, seconded by Moore. Is there any discussion? Roll call of votes. Councilor Anderson.
Anderson, aye.
Golombeski.
Golombeski, aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. Thank you. By way of announcements, a reminder, the water sampling study conducted by the Conservation Commission will occur again this year. To participate or review the 2019 data, you may visit littlecomptonwaterstudy.com. Any other announcements? Department head reports, that of the Department of Public Works.
Mataronis, move the Department of Public Works report on file, please.
Moore second.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Moore. Any discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Golombeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. Thank you. The next item is old business. Old business one, a request from Shannon Norris to discuss further the gate at South Shore Beach. I can't see the list of attendees, but Shannon, are you present?
She is, and I'm working to give her permission to speak.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Okay. I did forward the letter, so I'm sure you all know my concerns. And I guess I just want some confirmation of whether or not this is something that is going to move forward. The permanent gate at South Shore, and that doesn't mean anything about currently with the COVID restrictions. It's post-COVID pandemic, and who knows how long that's going to last. But once that is over, there are many people in town that would like to know if this gate moving forward is going to be permanent. And did everyone get a copy of the letter that I sent so they know?
We did, yes. Shannon, the copies were distributed and
okay.
retested.
Did Councilor Golombeski, did everybody get a copy of the Beach Commission's question and answers? I believe it answers her concerns.
Go ahead. The answer to your question is yes, it was sent from the town clerk to the 5 councilors and the town administrator.
Okay.
I do not believe she knows what that says. Could
Right,
someone read
I'm
it?
asking Councilor Golombeski, would you like to elaborate?
I would as soon as I can find it again. Has anybody got it out?
I've got it out. If you thought it appropriate to read this, I'm having a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure if it's just me. If you thought it appropriate to read this, I could just read the questions and answers. Is that appropriate, Mr. Mushin?
Yes, I think it would be, because this is a report from the police chief on behalf of himself and the fire chief to the member of the Beach Commission, Don Medeiros.
So this is a response from the police chief and fire chief from a series of questions posed by Don Medeiros of the Beach Commission, Scott Rains is the author. He writes, this is as of Tuesday, the 16th. Good morning, Don. I have spoken with Chief Petrin, and these are our collective thoughts. Question 1. This is the question posed by Don Medeiros. Should the gate be removed when the COVID pandemic is over, or should the gate remain in place? The question from the chiefs. We do not believe the gate/structure should be removed. It could certainly be used in the future during any type of weather-related emergency or other natural disaster resulting in the need for closure of the beach as it relates to public safety. We also believe that the gate structure itself is aesthetically pleasing and does not take away from the natural beauty of the area. Question 2 posed by Mr. Medeiros. If the gate remains in place, should it be permanently open except in the event of a public safety issue such as the one cited above? The chief's answer. We believe it should remain open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Closure of the gate would be at the discretion of the two chiefs in emergency situations. Any other requests to close the gate should first be brought to the attention of the chiefs. Mr. Medeiros' question number 3. If the gate is to remain in place, would it be for the intention of securing the parking lot from vehicular access during an emergency, such as, for example, the imminent threat of an approaching hurricane? The chief's answer, yes. And the fourth and final question from Mr. Medeiros. Do you have any other comments, pro or con, regarding the gate issue? The chief's response. The Little Compton Public Safety Complex does not have the manpower or resources to post a first responder at the entrance to the beach during times of emergency. The gate would be beneficial to the departments during times of emergency when our resources could be better utilized in other parts of town. It appears that historically there have been few issues over the years at South Shore Beach, and we would like to see it return to 24-hour access once the pandemic has passed. Thank you, Chief Scott Rains.
I believe, does that answer her questions, or are there others she would like to ask?
I do believe they answer my questions, and I have had a previous conversation with the chief of police. My only other question would be, I did contact the Coastal Resource CRMC for Rhode Island, asking them, and I agree with everything he said in his letter. If that is the intent, to have it there for emergencies only, I think the whole town of Little Compton would agree. My question moving forward, and maybe I need to pose this to the Beach Commission, so they are planning on having people there during the pandemic from the time the beach closes till 11 p.m. at night. Once these restrictions, the COVID restrictions are lifted, I'm hoping that we would have 24/7 access to the beach as we always have had in the past. I feel hopeful from those answers to those questions that that will happen. The CRMC was going to get back to me as far as their legal consult was going to get back to me as far as having a permanent gate there. So I will await their response, and I will definitely share that with you. And if the intent of the Beach Commission is the same intent that the chief of police just in your letter that, or in his letter that he read is the same, then I don't think any person in town would, protest that. We just want to be able to go to the beach after hours when the beach is closed, the lifeguards are gone, to be able to fish, to come there early in the morning, to be able to surf. I've had people in town contacted me that they drive there and sit and watch the surfers or the fishermen, and they're not able to get out of their vehicles. So that letter is absolutely beautiful, and I think it's what we all need to hear. And if we heard that in the very beginning, we would have been very happy with that. I hope at the next Beach Commission meeting they can share that, because I think it will just alleviate everyone's fears that, they're going to restrict our access. I'm very happy to hear that. And that letter will be posted in the minutes. Is that correct?
Yes,
minutes to this meeting?
yes, it will be.
Okay, okay. No, I'm very happy to hear that, and I'm sure that others in town will be happy to hear that as well. And maybe we can just, I know that we all love our beach, both sides of the fence, so to speak. Fun. So I'm very happy with that. And I hope that's the intent of the Beach Commission as well.
Well, thank you for your persistence in getting past what was a challenging situation at the last meeting where we were unable to communicate. I'm glad, A, that we're able to do it, and B, that you're able to hear what you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your time and efforts and all of that. And I'll share my, what I heard. And if anybody wants to hear see the answers to the questions, I'll let them know that the minutes will be posted and that the answers will be in the minutes. So I appreciate all your time, and I'm very happy with that response.
Thank you very much. I think we are happy.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Counselor Mushin,
Yes.
sorry. May I bring to your attention that there are 2 notes in the chat box. One of the residents who spoke in the chat box did have her hand up, so I think she might want to talk.
The chats are first that did not tell us when the beach would be open. The other state beaches are open. It's not fair that the beach is only open on weekends. Some of us work and are only able to visit during weekdays or evenings. Would someone want to respond to that? I believe that's a Beach Commission policy that the beach opens formally on Father's Day, but
It will be full-time as of Saturday, because that's been in their memo posted on our website for quite a while.
all right.
Maybe Jim Farrell can answer that. He's on.
Well, I did just give you the answer. He has his hands up, yep.
I noticed that the person who has put this item on the chat is on as well and unmuted. Do you have a comment, Tara?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Jim?
Yes, I just figured I would read over the operational guidelines that we're going to be operating under until the state changes our rules again. But basically right now, the gate will be open at 5 a.m. in the morning. Residents and sticker holders will be the only one allowed access between 5 and 8 a.m. 8 a.m., the ticket shack will open. Non-residents will be admitted. Non-residents will pay the daily rate. Resident and season stickers will be available from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. No fire permits at this time. Campers allowed. Cars will be limited to 125 cars. First 100 will be residents and non-residents. The last 25 will be residents only. Anyone entering the beach will be informed that they must be off the beach by 11 p.m. and the gates will be locked. Ticket shack closing 4 p.m. Employees will turn over admission responsibilities to a 2-man security detail, which will enforce the 125 car limit. The detail will only allow residents and beach sticker holders in after 4 p.m. Also, one of the questions I got is if we are on the beach, we bought a ticket before 4 p.m. and we're on the beach, are you going to kick us off? No, we're not. But we are going to maintain the 125 car limit. All vehicles must be off the beach by 11 p.m. when the gate will be locked. The detail will enforce beach rules such as no fires, no campers, etc. In inclement weather, South Shore Beach is not normally manned during inclement weather. In that event, the gate will be left open. Staff will return at 11 p.m. to lock the gate. So that's basically the operational guideline for this summer at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you. James Brady would like to speak.
Yes, please go ahead.
Mr. Brady, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm James Brady. I've lived at 19 Indian Road in Compton, where I've owned a house for the last 21 years. And my question arises from the protocols published by the Beach Commission, which state, and I read from them, starting Saturday, June 20th and running till Monday, September 7th, South Shore Beach will be operating under the following guidelines. My question arises from the second part of this phrase, until Monday, September 7th. Does that imply that there is any kind of plan to change access or reduce access after the 7th of September? Or is the anticipation that access will be at least as open as it is now after September 7th? Is there anything afoot to shut down the beach after the 7th of September?
I think that would be a beach commission answer.
Correct.
Well, my understanding from Jim Farrell is that there's no plan right now to shut the beach down or reduce access after the 7th. Now, we all understand if COVID-19 spikes and there's a dramatic change in the health situation, all plans could go into a cocked hat. But my question is, what is the current anticipation? Is there any plan afoot now to close down or restrict the beach after the 7th?
This is Bob Bush, and I'm not aware of any conversations regarding the September plan, except that, like the current summer, or like the summer plan, in the absence of the coronavirus, there would be a return to the quote, normal operation. But I'm not aware of any conversation about how the beach would be administered after the 7th of September. Specifically, has there been any conversation that we would close the beach then? No, there has not.
But the anticipation is that after the 7th, assuming the coronavirus situation doesn't worsen significantly, we would continue with the same access.
Right. My assumption would be that just as it was today on the 18th, it would be then.
Okay.
In the absence of any there's several months available for conversation, obviously, before then.
There are two hands up for speaking, Mr. Farrell and Mr. Medeiros. Mr. Medeiros is a board member, a beach board member.
Okay, Mr. Medeiros, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, members of the council. I raised my hand only because I thought perhaps Jim wanted a moment to not answer questions, but I'll basically say the date in September is the normal date that the beach is no longer staffed with lifeguards. There's nothing unusual or anything afoot relative to that date, but I need to turn it over to Jim because he has a much better handle on the. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Farrell, do you have anything to add to that?
At this point in time, Bob, pretty much everything you stated is exactly what's going on. There really hasn't been a discussion at this time, but I'm hoping and anticipating we all want to get this back to normal. And right now, there is no place to close the beach or limit access.
Thank you. Does the host have any more hands up that you see now?
No more hands up. There was just one more comment in the chat box that from a resident who would prefer a permanent gate not be there. Temporary barricades have done their job in the past. It was just a statement of their opinion.
Okay. Thank you. I see that now. All right. Is there any other conversation or discussion regarding this matter? We'll move then to old business number 2, a proposal for a subcommittee to draft a comprehensive plan for continued and safe access to Lloyd's Beach as presented by Councilor Moore. Councilor Moore, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you. So you all heard my very long motion and requested to get it in writing before this meeting. I think you've all had a chance to look it over as it's in our packet. Just to make a comment on it, I'd like to make 2 additions to this. One, in this, I guess we'll call it a committee, or we'll call it a committee. I'd like to include a member of the Beach Commission as requested by Don Maderas at our last meeting, and also include a member of the general public, or a member of from the general public of the town of Little Compton. And I think it's also maybe important to add a timeline to this proposal, maybe report back sometime in the fall. I think it's important with all of the changes down at Sakana Point over the last few years. I think it's important to, come up with a forward-looking approach and, ensure that we keep access to the shoreline down there. Not only for Little Compton residents, but, for the folks that enjoy fishing and use the access to the ocean from the shoreline down there. So I don't know, should I read the motion again?
Can I raise a point of order? Just Councilor Anderson, and at the last meeting, we tabled the motion. Are we starting from scratch, or should I offer a motion to take the previous motion off the table? Which I will do if that's appropriate.
I think we're at that point, yes, to either do that and then modify it as requested by the originator, or
I'll make a motion that we take Andrew's original motion presented at the last meeting off the table.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there discussion? All in favor? Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis. I'm sorry,
Gary?
you're muted, sir, I see.
You're still on mute, Gary.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moore.
Aye.
And Mushin, aye. The matter is then off the table and is in its original form of 4 points.
Mhm.
The originator has suggested that there would be two changes to it.
Yeah.
That the makeup of the committee would, well, those aren't in the points, but the makeup of the committee would be expanded to 2 more members, and the action be taken in the fall.
That I would request that they report back to the council in the fall.
Right.
Councilor Mataronis, how are we gonna go about seeing who's gonna be on this commission? I mean, Sakana Point is my area, so I assume I'm gonna be one of the council people that are on it. And there's only so much property down here to facilitate extra parking, so. I'm just wondering who's gonna lead this charge. Is it gonna be you, Andrew, that's gonna pull the people together? I mean, this is my busy season. I was hoping, let's just get Rhode Island Road open back up to the residents of Little Compton and not muddy the waters anymore with this thing. If you wanna walk around Sakana Point, say you can park there, and you can park there, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but I wanna get to Rhode Island Road, get a report from the town administrator. And from my understanding, he's been working diligently on that, and they've come up with a proposal to reopen that. And once that's reopened, let's see what we got down there for that point. But I'm not in the frame to be walking around Sakana Point this time of year in my busy season.
Mhm.
Some people that don't work, that's fine for them, but I do. My 2 cents.
This is Council Member Anderson. I'm a supporter of this for a couple of reasons. I do think Gary's point about the organization of a committee, it may be worth specifying. Andrew's motion describes the membership. It might, and again, this is another task for anybody who's on it. But I would wonder whether we should ask the town administrator to be responsible for organizing the committee. I think that would be appropriate. He's already invested a lot of work into this first stage. And to Gary's point, I think that's been constructive, both in terms of the progress made and doing it in a cooperative way with the neighbors. So I think another consideration, if we're going to amend this, is to authorize the town administrator to organize and chair the committee. I think that would be one suggestion I'd offer. And to the other point, I do think that and we've had quite a bit of discussion at the last meeting from citizens who asserted different kinds of opinions about the public's interest down there. And I think the purpose of, I think that the question of parking on Island Road and elsewhere at Secana Point is directly related to the question of the access to and control of access to and the management of Lloyd's Beach. And without, I've done my own kind of homework, amateur homework, and I think, and this is also related to the other question in the motion, which is with regard to title issues. We find that in addition to the plans, there are judicial opinions and so forth that suggest that the question of access and rights along Rhode Island Road are integral with the beach, that they're not separate issues. So I do think that the work that's been done is great, but it's not sufficient. We're going to be back here again every summer. So I think all that Andrew's calling for is to start a process that begins to investigate some of these issues. It doesn't call for any conclusions. It just starts a process. So, my suggestion is that we add another responsibility to the administrator, but to authorize him as part of this motion to organize and chair the committee. And on that basis, I would definitely urge that we proceed with this.
Mataronis here, that is in his motion, Larry. The first sentence is, my motion is to authorize the town administrator. But on top of that, seeing the town administrator was brought in this kind of under fire, and he's the one that's been negotiating with the residents down there, I would like him to also be part of this committee because he has firsthand knowledge of it, and
he's going to be the chair of it. That's my point.
Well, that's not what you said. You said authorize him to put a committee together.
Well, I thought I said to authorize and lead it. That would be my intent, just what you're suggesting.
More here, if I can comment. Yeah, my intent was to have the town administrator, fire chief, police chief, consulting with the solicitor if needed, and the 2 town council members to develop this comprehensive plan. So my intent was for the town administrator to be on this committee. And Gary, to your first point, that's why I included 2 council members in there. I did expect that you would want to have have a say in that or be a part of that committee. And I do understand that this is your busy season, and I hope that we can just keep information flowing like this, through the committee. So.
Thank you, Andrew.
If I may,
Please.
I didn't have any issues with the points. My only issue was with the crowd that's growing to oversee it. I don't understand why it can't just be the administrator, the fire chief, the police chief, and the solicitor to come back to us with something. They're all the ones that are going to have the major inputs on dealing with the public and all the rules and regulations. I think adding a bunch of 2 counselors and everything else like that, even Gary said it's a busy season, I think it's just going to muddy it up. That's my personal opinion. The more people you put, the more things you put in the soup, the murkier it gets. I'd just as soon see a leaner, like a 3-person or a 4-person party there, because the town administrator has direct contact with the solicitor, the fire chief and the police chief. He has direct contact with all of them as well. And if a counselor, Gary gets wound up about something, decides he's calling a solicitor and says something to the solicitor, and whoever the other one is does the same thing, and then the solicitor's got to go back to the administrator and bounce it back and forth. I think it just muddies the water. But then again, that's my opinion on it. I can't see putting anybody else on it but those four.
I totally disagree. I'll just put it that way. I mean, I think the framework that Andrew suggested has enough the council has some responsibility here. It needs some input during the process. Some council members.
No, I disagree, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important that we have some say from people that live in town as to what goes on down there. Not that I have any reservations about the three folks that you mentioned, but I think it's important that the council takes some responsibility for what's going on down there.
Mr. Chairman, have you heard?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the solicitor has had his hand up for a long time. I think we need to recognize him.
Thank you. So I studied this for about 31 years now. I've had at least 3 face-to-face meetings with Carl Affenraffel with a C. And the Affenraffels were always very kind and always admitted that the town, the inhabitants of the town, have rights and privileges in Lloyd's Beach. And they never backed away from that. What Carl Sr. didn't like is trash. I can understand that. But anytime we've ever raised any question to the Affenraffel family, they welcomed the town inhabitants. They had an extraordinary lawyer in Noel Field that studied it carefully. I think he worked very carefully with Phil Wilbur. As I said before, there's a very sophisticated map within the town hall that I've seen on a number of occasions. It tells us where to pasture our horses, etc. So, and then in, let's see, probably around 2011, we had an Aberrantes case, and we went to court on that. And the Whitehead family were extraordinarily decent to deal with. They always admitted that the town and conceded. I mean, they never even contested the town has rights there, privileges there, etc. So that issue is not especially complicated. I don't know who may or may not buy that property, but for the last, I don't know, must be 60, 70 years that, and I think Gary will confirm this, that townspeople have a right there, and they have an unfettered right there. I understand the parking issue sort of complicated whether you could get to Lloyd's Beach, but I don't think that's a problem at all. So I'm happy to serve. I'm happy to share my research with anyone on any committee.
Is it that we're trying to solve a problem or to set a policy for the future to preclude a problem? I'm not aware. I have not had a person brought to my attention that has an issue with access to Lloyd's Beach, but I'm certain.
And I think we can never have such an issue. I mean, the route speed is very clear.
Right.
I've never met anyone who's even contested the route speed. So, but I would like to see Rhode Island Road straighten out quickly, and then I think everything else will fall in place quite easily.
Bob, I would amend my thoughts somewhat, because as I'm sitting here, I'm going through the notes of what Andrew mentioned about a beach commission member. And if the beach commission is expressing an interest to be more involved, I don't see a problem with that. I just want to get all the information in front of us and then look at the problem. I just feel adding councilors to the mix doesn't help the problem any. It just prolongs it. I think we'll get a speedier results. But I will be amenable to adding a beach commission member to the group of 4 to make a group of 5.
Well, what is the actual motion we have before us? I mean, Andrew, this is Councilmember Anderson. You have your original motion. So where do we stand in terms of what we would be considering? Who's made another motion here that we formalize?
Well,
They
In
haven't.
my defense, I haven't made any motion, and we haven't amended Andrew's motion to include the other people he wanted either.
Right.
Right. This is the discussion of the matter that we tabled and are now brought back.
There is a resident who's had her hand up for a while that you might want to call on.
Yes, please proceed. Mrs. Katie.
I heard Andrew's motion, and I would just like to add that if we're going to have citizens on the committee, that perhaps you consider at least two. That's to avoid any conflict with, you picked a year-round resident, you picked someone from down Secana Point. So I think if you go with a resident, maybe two would be a good idea. My other thought was in terms of this has been going on for years. I remember my dad, when I was a little kid, getting a ticket down there and going before the town council and arguing the point of access, and, you know, they got rid of the ticket. So I do think it's important that at this time, we solve the issue as to access, where people park, where the access is, so that future generations don't have to deal with it. I also think it's important that we understand what the private guard's duty is and is not, because I can tell you 2 years ago, he chased me down the beach with two little kids I had with me, yelling and screaming that he was going to call the police because I wouldn't sign his book. So I think we need to know what the parameters are.
Exactly. Mr. Mushing, may I have permission, partly in response to Solicitor Humphrey's comments about title issues, to share my screen just to show a couple of images of the evolution of ownership down there? If I share my screen, I have about 5 images that I would like to show, but I can wait until we procedurally where we stand.
I actually think that goes far afield of what we're doing tonight. Respectfully, Mr. Anderson, I'd love to see the pictures because I kind of liked the history of the beach, et cetera. But I think that goes beyond tonight's agenda.
Well, I'm responding specifically to assertions that you made about the title history. That's what I want to show.
All I'm talking about is the launch deed in my conversations with Carl Haffenraffer as well as John Whitehead.
Well, I think there are, my whole point, and this follows from Cheryl Katie's comments, is that I believe that there's a history, a legal history. I'm not a lawyer, but I've looked, like you, at court cases, at recent.
No, I participated in court cases.
Yeah, yes, I know, but I am a council member. I'm entitled to an opinion as well about the confusion, about the clarity of the property interests involving the beach. I believe
precisely the point of Andrew's motion, which is we'll have the committee study.
I agree that this needs to be, and Cheryl Katie's point is directly on point, and I'll be blunt about this. A question arises about and this is cited in recent deeds involving that property, about the rights and obligations of the property owners who don't involve the Haffenraffers directly anymore for any of those properties that involve the beach. The Nature Conservancy is the owner, the Whiteheads are the owner. There are easements on both. There's a DEM easement on the Nature Conservancy portion. There's a CRMC easement on the Whitehead portion. There are all kinds of added restrictions. This has to, the current history as well as the Roch history all have to be looked at to see who has the right and obligation to have a guard there. Because the reason there's a guard there is not because the Whiteheads are doing it, it's some other parties are doing it. And we have some responsibility as a council to make clear who has that authority.
I don't know who has that authority because I know the inhabitants of the town have the authority to go on that beach and exercise their rights. No one's going to stop that as far as I know.
A lot of people would like to know then what is the guard doing there?
Why don't you ask them?
What is their authority to prevent anybody from going there under circumstances? Anyway.
I don't know. I haven't discussed the guard since the last guard case, which was 2011.
Say that again. I didn't hear that.
I have not discussed any guard since 2011 when we had a court case about it and the matter was resolved in the town's favor with the Whiteheads.
The Whiteheads are selling, well, we won't argue that now. There is a guard there. Neighbors came to the council in October 2018, asked the town to take over the guard because private individuals other than the Whiteheads are taking the responsibility. I'll leave it.
No, Larry, let's be clear. They didn't ask to take over. They said pay for it. And the town council said no.
Yes, but my question is, what is their authority to be putting a guard there? Other citizens, why couldn't I put a guard there?
I don't know. And I don't want to get into the fact you're related to the Half-Raffer family either.
Is there an advantage to some?
I'm related to the Half-Raffer family? I am, but what does that have to do with anything? I mean,
well, you know, why are we talking about a guard when we're trying to talk about access for the public to get to Lloyd's Beach, which should be unfettered?
Well, we've had comments from the public who don't feel that it's unfettered. That's why I think we have to get this process going to address some of these questions directly.
I couldn't agree with you more, but why would we do it tonight when you're going to show us some images that should be shown to the committee?
I would be glad to do that at that time. I was trying to.
I look forward to it. Maybe we can meet tomorrow.
So can I comment just to Paul, if it makes you more comfortable, I'll make a motion to amend the committee, you know, the formation of this committee to just include the town administrator, police chief, fire chief, and a member of
Beach committee?
Beach committee. If that's going to affect how you vote on it. I don't know.
That would, because it's already starting to get muddied, and I'd rather see it move forward. From a person who's not versed in the law, the guard at the gate is hired by the property owner to make sure that only the people that they have to allow in, which is town residents, may enter. The guard at the gate has no authority to stop anybody from town going in there. He's only there, and he's paid by the people who own the property. He's not paid by the town. The town has free access. The town needs no one there. If there's confusion there, you call the cops. Have the cops come down. The cops will straighten it out and tell the guard, you can't stop these people, they're from town. And I know the guy has been, and over the past few years, the guy has been a little aggressive sometimes, and he's annoyed people like Cheryl, and other people I've heard from town residents. And I've told him the same thing. He's there to make sure you're a town resident. If you have no proof of town residency, just walk in, even if you are a town resident, let him call the cops. That's just what's going to happen. And again, it's the landowner is trying to keep out people they don't have to allow on the property, and those are people who are non-Little Compton residents. That's the way it's been, and it's confusing, but that's the way it's been.
I'll second Andrew's motion. Councilor Anderson will second Andrew's motion.
The motion has been made and seconded, made by Councilor Moore and seconded by Councilor Anderson to develop or to appoint a committee to develop and return to the council with a proposal for a comprehensive plan. And it outlines the details of that comprehensive plan.
Hey, Bob, I think my motion was to amend the committee, the makeup of the committee first.
Right.
Oh, sorry, I don't know if that's where you're going.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that committee then, in the amended motion, consists of the administrator, the fire chief, the police chief, the solicitor, and 2 members of the council, and a member of the beach commission, and 2 members of the general public.
No.
No, I don't think that's what he said.
My amendment was just to include the administrator, the 2 chiefs, and a member of the beach committee.
And the solicitor, I believe the solicitor was
Yeah,
involved.
and the solicitor, yeah.
5 members. The administrator, the 2 chiefs, the solicitor, and the member of the beach commission.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Are you ready to vote? Councilor Anderson.
I vote aye.
Lewandowski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushroom, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item of business is to receive an update on the financial town meeting process. Specifically, the financial town meeting this year will be done via virtual means. It's on the 30th of June at 7 p.m. Individuals intending to attend must register by the 26th of June, which is Friday before the meeting. They do that by calling the town clerk and registering. This allows us to use attendees as voters and satisfy to the greatest extent possible the need to make it a will of the people vote. And I, in company or in support of that, have written an endorsement to Representative Canario and Senator De Palma on behalf of the council, saying that we support strongly the modification of a particular bill, a particular act, which permits the kind of meeting we're talking about. That measure passed this afternoon in the House, and it is for consideration before the Senate. The fact that it passed by unanimous consent in the House bodes well for the fact that the Senate will do so. That then permits us to move forward on the 30th with a virtual meeting using the techniques we set up.
Councilman Mataronis, Bob, can you reiterate what needs to be done for people to come on Zoom? You said they have to register by the 26th. Could you tell us what that process is going to be, how they register?
Yes, they need to call the town clerk's office and speak to the town clerk or her representative in order to be registered to be part of that meeting. They will then be provided the necessary credentials to access them.
Now, I assume the town council members don't need to do that. We're going to be included, or we also need to do that?
I have already registered the town council and the budget committee, the moderator, the assistant moderator, and the non-resident town officials that need to participate in the meeting. Those are all registered. And
okay.
I have approximately 50 people that have already registered.
50 others besides that?
No, 50 total so far.
50 total, okay. Yeah. Councilor Anderson.
Two things. One is we should take this opportunity to encourage voters to register. This is an unprecedented procedure. It's not as simple as just showing up on the night of the meeting. So it's as simple as calling the town clerk's office or reaching the town clerk by her email address. The important point is, and there may be an item of confusion, that in the budget committee report, which was sent to every voter, most of the information needed to register is on your mailing label for each individual. We inadvertently, a individual voter ID was omitted, but Carol has other means to identify, to verify the eligibility, because only voters are eligible to vote at town meetings. So the verification is important. So there is a little confusion there, but the important point is to contact directly the town clerk's office who will then verify that you're a voter and provide the login information for the meeting. So it is important for people to reach out to the town clerk sooner than later, and for each of us to encourage people to register. And I want to thank Carol Wardell for all her efforts to attend to every single detail of this challenge, which is a first, I think, in hundreds of years of Little Compton history, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any further questions on that? In conjunction with that, then, I would propose that we consider scheduling a town council meeting for Thursday, the 2nd of July. That's simply a date I chose. It's not, doesn't have any particular significance except that it's after the financial town meeting, to implement any decisions of the annual financial town meeting. Should the meeting go as as scheduled and there are no issues, it would be easy to cancel, but I think we should have it on the calendar.
Mataronis, motion to place a town council meeting on July 2nd at 7 p.m.
More
Council
second.
Golembeski, I'll second.
Councilor Mataronis made the motion, Councilor Moore seconded the motion, and Councilor Golembeski also seconded it. But for the record, Mataronis and Moore were the two that I heard. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. There will be such a meeting scheduled.
Might I clarify, is that for 7 p.m.?
Yes, I think I said 7 p.m. Yes.
If you did, I missed it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item of old business concerns COVID-19 updates. The first is the need that we have to consider extension of the declaration of emergency and the adoption of the declaration of emergency. We used the term 60 days in the past. That brings us by the calendar to the 29th of June. Hence, we thought it would be important to consider it at this meeting. I would suggest that we assign a date certain rather than a number of days hence, so that we remove any ambiguity. Obviously, we also want to include, it seems to me, the provision that should the council act before that, it would be rescinded. But at least at this point, I would propose that we have an extension of the declaration of emergency to the 31st of July, 2020, unless sooner revoked by the council. I would make that motion.
Second.
The motion is made by Mushin, seconded by Mataronis. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
I vote aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. Thank you. The next item related to COVID-19 is the receipt of the fourth memo to the council regarding actions taken by the council president and the town administrator. Is there any question or discussion on that item? Or would there be a motion to place that memorandum on?
So moved.
Second, Mataronis.
Councilor Golembeski moves to place it on file. Councilor Mataronis seconds. Is there further discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. The next item is to report to you that on the council's behalf, I have revised Special Directive 3 regarding town beaches in order to update it for the current conditions. And I have further rescinded Special Directive 2, which limited transfer station deposits to be only household trash. That is no longer a problem for us. I don't need you to vote on this unless you so choose. I want to just make you aware that the special order has been, in one case, revised, and the second case was. The next item is a memo from the Fireworks Committee Chair offering a report on the postponement of the fireworks celebration. Basically, the Fireworks Committee met and decided to, in the best interest of all, to postpone the fireworks from Saturday, August 1st, which was its scheduled date, to late summer. They will continue to meet and continue to evaluate when we can gather that kind of number of people. Is there a motion to place this report on file?
So moved.
Golembeski moves.
Second,
Moore seconds. Is there further discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. Moving then to new business, it is the time of year in which we authorize the treasurer to make end of fiscal year balance fund transfers and to encumber funds for specific purposes. You'll see from the document that is in your package, there are three listed. I have a fourth to tell you about. the town administrator fund line needs augmentation from the contingency because merit pay was charged incorrectly. FY19 merit pay was charged to his FY20 account, thereby making less available than it would have been. The insurance line needs to be supplemented because we under budgeted that line. If you realize we form our budgets in November, December, and we typically get notified by the interlocal trust in February as to the budgeted number, and have no opportunity to raise that number. So hence that's the purpose of the contingency. The huge bulk of the contingency is to pay for the fire department's two things. Injured on duty overtime coverage was required for the entire fiscal year due to the absence of a member. And so that amount, I believe, may be a bit light. I don't think it will come to 55,000, but I'm leaving it there just while we assess what the next payroll has. And then there is a fourth item, and that is the merit pay for this year that we will consider an evaluation here in a couple of items. But the merit pay that we're paying to those contracted departments which have that in their department heads that have that in their contract needs to be covered from the contingency, which was part of the intent of the contingency in the first place. So that is a long statement to say the contingency fund, which has about $66,000, I propose that it would cover the funds of the town administrator, insurance, fire department to the extent possible, and merit pay. The second item is to transfer from indicated special funds to the indicated accounts with shortfalls. A special fund entitled the Town Code Fund, which has no, in my tenure, no heritage, no use. It's never been tapped. It's called the Town Code Fund. As best I can determine, it was established to pay for town code expenses. We have them this year in excess, hence the council budget is over by $4,000. I would propose that the Town Code Fund, which has about $8,000 in it, be used to supplement that. And I've also listed the reserve fund, and I would commit to you that I would only wish to use this if required. Obviously, the reserve fund is a part of and subtracts from the available dollars in the general fund. So it's not something I take lightly, and we're bound by certain requirements of the financial town meeting and of the charter, which we satisfy in this case because of the COVID costs being an unexpected emergency that the council approves expenditures for. But I will commit to you that we will take only the dollars from that we can't cover by the contingency fund. And I just, at this point, I'm not able to say what the fire department's needs will be. The remainder, there are interdepartmental revisions, the legal contingency, which we established within the legal line, would take funds and apply it to consulting because of COVID and vineyard expenses that have occurred that were unanticipated this year. The building official to move dollars from department expenses to inspection, boards and commissions to take from the zoning board and give to the planning board, given that the planning board conducted substantial ordinance revision research and the zoning board had a rather light year in terms of expenditures. Take a breath. Any questions there?
Bob, this is, you may have just mentioned this, and this is a dumb question. I'll probably be embarrassed by the answer. But in this form, you refer to the BOY estimated budgets. Can you tell me what that BOY is an abbreviation or acronym for?
It's a very fair question. Being an acronym dependent person such as myself, it's beginning of the year as opposed to BOY, which is
okay. Well, I knew it was a simple, but I couldn't quite. I couldn't.
Not a boy, but it's like.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm proposing we encumber You see 6 there. There are actually 7. The administrator has brought forward one other request. The Conservation Committee for its continuing water study, the treasurer to pay for paychecks upgrades that did not happen this year that we still need to have, the infotech line to pay for server upgrades, wastewater facility to fix the field in the outfield, highway to do street repairs, town landing because those funds were appropriated for that, and that project has been slowed but not stopped, and it's going to need to be used in the next year. And then the assessor, administrator, you are muted at this point, but I wonder if you can name the figure there that the assessor needs, it just in round, sort of round numbers. Do you know what that is?
You'll need to mute yourself.
No, muted. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Which number again? I'm sorry, Mr. President.
The amount the assessor needs for training. These were trainings that they were unable to attend.
Unfortunately, she was not able to provide that to me because she had a personal day out today.
Okay, thank you. So those are the items that again, these figures are estimates. I think they're good estimates, but we will provide you obviously a completed sheet at the end. Finally, to transfer account balances from lines to the particular funds. The remaining dollars in the solicitor line would go into the legal reserve. The reval funds would go into the reval line, residual would go into the reval fund. The capital expenditure account would be all of those dollars put in the capital fund, and the civic recreation line put in the recreation fund for the reasons cited. That then is our proposal.
To approve that, Bob?
It would be, I'd appreciate a motion that says the items that were named are approved and the amounts are understood to be approximate, and that the actual amounts will be reported back to the council at its first July meeting, well, at its July 9th meeting.
Is that in the form of a motion? If it is, I'll second it.
So you've made the motion, Bob. Gary seconded it.
All right. The motion then is made by Mushin, seconded by Mataronis. Is there further discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. Thank you very much. Next is to set salary and benefits for fiscal 21. The only change in the salary and benefit line, which each of you has somewhere in your books a copy of our vote on June 20th of last year and our supplemental vote on July 11th. The only change proposed in any of those lines is the consideration for, or potential change is the consideration for the harbor master. We typically use this opportunity, and this is, harbor master doesn't have, unlike the others, a written contract that we cite, therefore we salary in it, therefore we assign his salary at this juncture.
Councilor Mataronis, I'm requesting a 2% increase on the harbor master's salary. He doesn't collect health benefits or any of the other gratuitous payments that the rest of the town employees receive, and I think the majority of the other town employees get a 2% increase basically every year. So I would request that the council support that 2% increase for the harbor master.
Is that your motion?
That is my motion.
I'll second it.
The motion is made by Mataronis, seconded by Golembeski to raise the harbor master salary by 2% in the next fiscal year. Is there further discussion? Councilor Anderson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Mushin, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item of the next portion of that item is to authorize myself and the administrator to authorize payment of final fiscal year invoices that we received by the 26th of June.
So moved.
Second, Mataronis.
The motion is made by Golembeski, second by Mataronis, to authorize president and administrator to pay those bills. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you.
Before you leave,
Yes.
to vote the remaining salary and benefits page. You amended just the harbor master's salary. You did not vote the entire slate.
Is there a motion to, with that exception, adopt the figures, to adopt unchanged the figures for last year as the figures for next year for each of those categories?
So moved.
Second.
The discussion. Golembeski moves, Mataronis seconds. Councilor Anderson, how do you vote? And Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion votes aye. Thank you. Thanks for the correction.
Thank you.
The next is to establish a process for department head fiscal year 20 performance reviews. Since there was a blank Thursday, I thought maybe we'd like to meet 4 Thursdays in a row. So I would propose that we consider, if it meets people's schedules, that we meet an executive session and then vote in open session thereafter. Let's see, yeah. I'm just looking at the top of the form. To be reviewed in executive session and voted in an open session. We had anticipated being able to do that at this meeting. That is not the case. It's a special meeting, therefore that would be open, both executive and open session on the 25th.
Well, we've already got a council meeting on the 2nd, and we're going to have another one on the 9th, I believe.
Yes.
So that leaves the 16th or the 30th are the only two that are open.
No, he's asking for June 25th.
I failed to impress you with my ability to fill in the blanks. I am talking about doing it on the 25th of July, a week from tonight.
June.
June, sorry. Did I say July before?
You did.
My apologies.
Had me confused. Didn't take much.
Nor me.
I'll move for an executive session. Well, it's a council meeting with an executive session on the 25th. That's what you're looking for?
Yes.
No. What I would like to do is to meet not virtually, personally in executive session to conduct the interviews like we did with the candidates for finance director, and to meet in the council chambers, observing social distancing in executive session in order to conduct the interviews of the 6 people, one of whom is the town administrator himself, and then determine the award of merit.
What time?
That's, you tell me what you think.
Bob, do you think 15 minutes is enough per person, or Tony, do you think 15 minutes is enough per person?
15 minutes, yes.
So you want to meet at 6 o'clock?
That will work for me if that seems good for others.
Yep.
All right, is there a motion then to convene an executive session at 6 p.m. on June 25th, Thursday, June 25th, in the council chambers for purposes of conducting department head contract review?
So moved.
Second.
The motion is made by Golembeski, second by Mataronis. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. The next item is to report to you, the next item is discussion of policy with regard to emails sent to all council members at the joint address. There is an address, towncouncil@littlecomptonri.org, which ends up sending a person's message and it's typically used by a citizen who wishes to contact all of the members of the council. It's sent to 5 members of the council, the administrator, and the town clerk. And the question has been raised by Councilor Anderson, what is that we discuss the policy that we're going to use. I think to ensure that we don't have a problem with responding eventually at a meeting, but we do potentially have a problem of does the person know anyone has heard the request? Sir.
Right. Can I just address this? I don't have a specific proposal or motion, but I did want us to discuss it so that we were sort of on the same page about our process, because I have been aware that certainly over the last month in particular that I have received, and I've learned for the first time that the clerk and the administrator also get these messages, so I wasn't aware of that. But what concerned me, and I counted I got about 16 since May 22nd that I'm aware were sent to all of us. And before that, I hadn't seen too many, frankly, during my tenure on the council. And many of these were with beach-related issues, but not all of them. Many of them were substantive. They didn't all demand responses, but some of them sort of invited responses. So my concern was that we, just as you put it, Bob, that we discuss whether we need some kind of consistent policy for documenting, acknowledging, and responding to these emails. Because frankly, I feel when I receive it that these deserve a response, but I'm uneasy with responding individually because I believe that in some cases the council should be deliberating on them and trying to speak with one voice if it has one of these. So, and I'm also uncomfortable with the prospect that we would begin a round of communications by replying all that were in a way that was not compliant with the Open Meetings Act. But so my two concerns are this: that we without these don't appear on our agenda typically, for instance, and without there being on the agenda, we don't really have a way to discuss those that are substantial. For instance, we had a letter, a substantial letter from the Nature Conservancy the last few weeks that was addressed to that address. I have a copy. It's not on our agenda. It can disappear into the ether unless we have some way to determine which of these should be on the agenda and so forth. So those are my concerns. And again, I don't have a specific proposal, but I do think we need to think about, it's important to acknowledge these and document that people are reaching out to this. If they were sending us a handwritten letter, it would likely go on our agenda, whether people asked that it be on the agenda or not. So I do think we have to think about a consistent way of screening and or acknowledging these. And the council president, the town clerk generally make up the agenda. That's one way to approach it, some kind of screening. So I just throw it out there as to how we should deal with this.
Carol, go ahead.
No, go let Carol speak.
We had an opportunity to speak with the IT staff, and they were not hopeful, given the nature of how that works, that we could establish a process that would, carve out one person who could answer, but they're going to investigate that.
Well, the ultimate decision there was there cannot be an automatic reply without a serious amount of IT time spent to set that up. I think it was cost effective in that sense. I have no problem, because I do receive a copy of everything that is sent to that town council email, of taking on the responsibility of just responding to the person saying your email has been received and will be forwarded to the council. And then that way, when we're setting up an agenda, we can determine whether it's something that's just a comment that we've asked for that goes in a particular file and goes on consent, or whether it's something that needs to go on an actual communications need.
Bob, I agree with Carol. She should be the point person on this, because the council doesn't want does not want to get stuck in something called, what's called a rolling meeting, which would violate the Open Meetings Act. So I think it's appropriate that, you know, as long as Carol gets a copy of it, then she can respond and say, thank you, it's been received. That's about it.
Well, matter owner here, you know, especially with the beach and the situation down here at Secana Point, people watching the meeting on Thursday will ask me a question, and I just feel it's my duty to respond to them in a timely manner, not wait for 2 weeks until the next meeting comes. And I respond only to those people that respond to me. If it's Joe somebody, I'll respond to Joe somebody back, and that's it. I won't do a blanket reply, but I just think it's pertinent that we get to these people so they're not feeling like they're forgot about by the town council. Now, maybe that's wrong to do that, but I think we have responsibility. If somebody asked us a question, I mean, if somebody was at the Commons lunch and came up to me and asked me a question, I would answer that question. If somebody sends something to me by email and I respond only back to that person, I don't see what the difference is if somebody comes up to me and
I would agree with you. I think the potential issue would be that, let's say you and I each respond to that person with different answers. And then that, you know, so it's, yeah, having the clerk or someone say we received your item establishes that it got here. But satisfaction of the person's concern that have I made an impression on anybody certainly is satisfied by what you're saying. It's just that were we to go to a ridiculous extreme, 5 of us would answer with different answers, and the person would be suspicions confirmed. They don't know what they're doing. So you know, it's that subtlety, I guess.
So for myself, you know, depending on the volume of these, and again, this may be a function of the times, people having to communicate by these means because other means are harder these days. We don't know how this will play out, but this is a fairly new, I think, as I understand, it's a fairly new option for people. You know, for me, I would err on the side of, unless there's a good reason not to, of including these on our agenda. Maybe even under one heading, you know, emails received. I don't regard them as different from receiving a letter. And I do think there's, and some of them are quite substantive. As I say, the letter we received from Nature Conservancy, I believe should be on our agenda sometime. Otherwise, again, it disappears from the record. So I think it's appropriate that Carol, who is working on the agenda anyway, so that I guess the choice we're left with, that each of us individually, if we thought something deserved to be on the agenda, would have to ask that it be put on the agenda, or Bob and Carol, for instance, who put the agenda together, could make some decisions about whether some of these should go on the agenda. I tend to think that would be the open and transparent way, so that people who contact us know that they're being acknowledged.
Right. Larry, to be clear, I am in full agreement with you. I do believe they belong on an agenda. The one that you're quoting from the Nature Conservancy, we were only copied on that. It was addressed to the Beach Commission. The reason why it was not on tonight's agenda is because it was not heard by the Beach Commission yet. And it didn't feel appropriate for the council to act on something that they hadn't acted on yet, since we were copied. That will be on your agenda next meeting, though.
So, if I may, sir, so I just want to clarify something because it frustrates me a little bit. So, if a constituent comes up to each one of us individually and asks us a question and we give them an answer, there's no problem with that. If they email us a question and we give them an answer, whatever it is, yes, no, maybe, and then they make that as an attachment to the next email they send to the next counselor, does that constitute the rolling quorum? Because the next counselor sees the response of the other counselor?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
I agree with Carol.
Yeah.
So,
And moreover, Carol acts as a filter. And if you look at tonight's agenda, it's manageable. So she acts as a filter. I don't think anyone's ever wanted something on here that didn't get on the agenda. But you're right, Carol, and I think Carol and I agree that we don't want to get caught in a rolling meeting.
and I understand the implications. It just, in the modern world with the new technology and with what's going on with COVID, all of a sudden someone has almost virtual instant access to all 5 of us, which doesn't happen in the normal world. Normally you'd write a letter, the council and Carol would get it to go through procedure. Now they can just blast out an email to all of us for an answer. And now I feel like I understand why we can't do it, but to me, it'd be very frustrating as a constituent that I'm not getting a response from Councilor so-and-so because he's afraid that he's going to talk to the other one through an email and it's going to turn into an issue.
That would be the advantage of a policy that says, here's how it works. And that policy could be as simple as items that are addressed to the council will appear in the consent agenda unless there's a reason for them to go somewhere else. And that way we ensure that everybody gets to see it and someone has the opportunity to pull it off if they want. That could be part of our process of assembling the agenda.
Okay. All right.
And your point's well made. That still is, all the things you said still will happen, but we will be able to then say, here's where they are. Here are the items we received. What's your pleasure there? Do you want to formally establish such a procedure? Do you believe
I think that you discussed it. I think that was the point, to discuss it. I'm not so sure because it's an evolving thing. Larry raises a good point. We don't know how often we're going to get these kind of things. So, but I think it's important and it can be brought up, in subsequent.
Yeah, having raised the question, and Bob, you had articulated an approach, Carol has, I'm personally comfortable now that we've discussed it with those responsible for preparing the agenda to basically deal with this on a case-by-case basis, and we'll see where it goes. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is to report that the town administrator has, on behalf of the town, accepted the offer of the Rhode Island Association of Fire Chiefs to provide what is called a statewide testing. Basically, what this will help us with is not having to pay for test materials. The testing will be done statewide, and a candidate who takes a test would then be eligible to apply to any department who is participating, which I anticipate most of them will. The next item of business is to receive letters of interest for the following boards and commissions. And the first of these is for the Agricultural Conservancy Trust, a 5-year term expiring on the 30th of June, so it begins the 1st of July. And we have 3 candidates, the incumbent and 2 other candidates for that position.
Carol raised a question on this Carter Wilkie. Does it have to be a resident to be appointed to the Ag Trust? Larry, you might know that.
The enabling legislation specifies that a trustee on the Agricultural Conservancy Trust must be a resident elector of the town of Little Compton. I did tell Mr. Wilkie when he submitted his letter that was a requirement, and I left it up to him. He does live in town, but he's just not a registered voter. I left it up to him as to whether or not he wanted to pursue that any further. I never heard back from him.
Okay, well, previously, if there's an incumbent that we apply to generally, or it's my feeling that we generally reappoint the incumbent. Now, I think Don McNaughton's done an awful lot for the town, especially with his water testing procedure, but I think I would like to reappoint Ellie Field. That'd be my motion.
I'll second that because I believe we should reward incumbency, especially if they've done a great job and been consistent. And I agree with you, Gary, on Don. Don's a great guy and be an awesome asset as well. But I don't think he's going to go away.
Okay, there's a motion then to,
Well, we have, was that a motion, Gary, that you made?
Yes, it was.
motion to appoint Ellen Field and seconded by Councilor Golembeski to the Agricultural Conservancy Trust. What discussion?
Can be further discussion on that motion? Two things. In fact, recently when we've had more than one applicant, and I think, I can't recall whether it's been incumbents, we have interviewed the candidates, number one. And number two, and I am sensitive to this, but I will say it frankly, the Agricultural Conservancy Trust is a very important board. The terms are 5 years. We have reappointed in the last year and a half, directly or indirectly, 3 of the incumbents. Bill Richmond, who was chair of the who was chair of the Conservation Commission and serves on the trust because he's on the Conservation Commission, not because we appointed him directly. Don could be the chair on the commission next week if he chose to, but he prefers not to push aside Bill Richmond. We reappointed Mike Steers to the Planning Board. He serves on the trust because he's the chair of the Planning Board. And we reappointed, I think, David Wexler, who it turned out was the one candidate dropped out at the time. So I have a concern, frankly, that there's that although there are dedicated and longtime residents, members of the trust, that with 5-year terms, there's very little opportunity to get new perspectives on the trust, and I believe that organization needs some new perspective. I'll just put it that way. So I think we want to proceed. I'm just suggesting an option would be to actually hear from McNaughton. I guess Wilkie, Carter Wilkie is not eligible in any case, so we can't really consider him at this point. But the option is to actually hear from both candidates.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I agree with Larry. I mean, our practice has been to interview the candidates if there's been more than one applicant, whether or not there's been an incumbent. I think most recently with that planning board position. So I think we should do an interview.
Are we going to do the interview by Zoom?
We could.
We could do it in company with what we do next week in person.
If the candidates are comfortable doing that, I'm open to it.
So I guess the question is, we have a motion on the table, whether to proceed with that or whether we do something else in terms of interviews. I don't know what Gary would be willing to do or think appropriate.
Well, I'll withdraw my motion and make a motion to interview next Thursday evening.
I'll second that motion, Councilor Anderson. Thank you.
The motion is made by Mataronis. The first motion has been withdrawn by Councilor Mataronis, and a second motion has been offered to conduct interviews of the 2 candidates.
I can't see, I know Mr. Wilkie, he's a thoughtful guy, but as of the moment, he's not eligible.
Okay,
Bob, does Paul have to withdraw his second?
Yes, he should.
I'll withdraw my second.
thank
Thank
you. Thank you.
And what time was the meeting next? 6 o'clock?
Yes,
So should we schedule those interviews for 5:30?
we could.
These, the two ag trust members for 5:30.
Yes.
Put them ahead of the others. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I'll
because
second.
we don't
if
know
that-
how long that executive session's gonna last, and I don't want them sitting there waiting for us, so we'll just come a half an hour early and we'll interview them, and then we'll go into the executive session.
Is that your motion, Gary?
That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Well, Larry already did second it.
Oh, my apologies.
Motion then to interview the two candidates at 5:30 and 5:45 respectively on the 25th of June. It's made by Mataronis and seconded by seconded by Anderson. Is there further discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Councilor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you very much. Thanks for the work on it.
Thank you.
Next is the harbor master. We have a single applicant, the incumbent.
Motion to place Mike Master, the harbor master, for ensuing year.
Second.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski to appoint Mike Massett to continue as harbor master. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. The next is the harbor master.
Assistant.
Sorry, the assistant harbor master. The single applicant is the incumbent.
I'll make a motion to reappoint Charles Hall as the assistant harbor master for the ensuing year.
I'll second that one.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski to appoint Charlie Hall. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. The next item is the three members of the pension committee. All three incumbents have sought reappointment. No other person has sought appointment. Therefore, Mr. Ham, Mr. Mara, and Mr. Lord are our three candidates for the pension committee.
Motion to reappoint the three incumbents.
Second.
Motion's made by Golembeski, second Mataronis. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. Communications, a letter from the Federal Emergency Management Agency notifying the town that the firm flood insurance study and flood insurance rate map hazard determinations have been rescinded. So now we've gone back to what we had before.
Well, you will after July 9th.
Well, yeah, right. We are asked to go back to where we are before, and so we need to rescind and then advertise to hear the rescission of the vote and amendment in a hearing on July 9th. Is there such a motion?
There is. Confusing as it may be, there is.
So the motion is made by Councilor Golembeski. Is there a second?
Second, Mataronis.
Second, Mataronis. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. Letter from the Buzzards Bay Coalition for permission for the Buzzards Bay Watershed Ride on Sunday, October 4th.
Motion to approve with all town stipulations adhered to and with concurrence by the both the fire chief and police chief.
Could I ask also that they be required to conform to any COVID restrictions that are applicable?
I'll add that to my motion.
I'll second his amended motion.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski to authorize the ride subject to conditions. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Next is a request, might I, with your, request from David Elwell to renew his license to haul refuse.
Motion to approve, Mataronis.
Second.
Discussion. Mataronis and Golembeski move and second the reappointment of David Elwell. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. A similar request from Fred Boddington III to renew his license.
Motion to approve Fred Boddington for his refuse hauling license.
Second.
Mataronis makes the motion, Golembeski seconds. Further discussion. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Request from Wilma, doing business as Wilma's at Walker's for a victualling and holiday sales license.
Motion to approve with all town stipulations adhered to.
I'll second that as well.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski to grant the license. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor
Aye.
Golembeski. Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. A request from Robert Skiffington to renew his private detective's license for the ensuing year.
Motion to approve with concurrence by the police chief.
I'll second that as well.
Motion is made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. An abatement request of the tax assessor.
I spoke with the tax assessor on this, and generally, abatement come in as a reduction, this comes in as an increase, so I will definitely give this abatement.
Definitely what, sir?
What I said was, the person that asked for this got an abatement from his previous assessed value. His new assessed value was increased, so there's an increase of $460.29.
Right. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
Did you say approve?
Yes, approved.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the request of the assessor, Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. And a request from Stephen Reuter for his license to haul refuse.
Motion to approve Stephen Reuter's license to haul refuge.
Second.
Motion made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Then a request from the United Congregational Church to hold a confirmation blessing at the town landing on June 21st, which would be Sunday, at 11 a.m. They will practice social distancing.
Motion to approve.
As long as they do adhere to all state and town regulations as far as COVID-19 is concerned.
Let Gary take it, I'll second.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I didn't hear you, Paul.
Motion was made by Mataronis, second by Golembeski. Further discussion. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion. Aye. Motion carried.
Motion to place the consent calendar on file unless anybody wants to pull anything for discussion.
I'll second that.
Can I pull out 3D? The resolution adopted by Portsmouth Town Council condemning racist attacks, urging efforts to recognize and stop racism.
That'd be fine.
Then the motion would be to file all but the resolution from Portsmouth. Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Yes, sir, go ahead.
I don't know the proper procedure here, but I think I'd like to pass a similar resolution to this. I don't know, would it be best to write it ahead of time, or can we vote on passing one that's similar to the one that Portsmouth put together?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I look at this, Andrew, and I would support it in principle, but I'm wondering whether, and maybe you would volunteer to do it, whether it would be appropriate to write one that is particular to Little Compton. And I would suggest that maybe you bring a resolution back to us at our next meeting. That would be a good approach to doing it.
I would agree with that. In fact, even this one cites a Newport issue in a Portsmouth resolution, but it would certainly be, regardless of that, it would be important, it seems to me, to make it applicable to our town, the resolution, that is.
Okay, I can put one together that would be a little more applicable to Little Compton.
Okay. Is there then a motion to place is there a motion to bring back the proposed resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Moore, second by Mataronis. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Malinowski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. Thank you. Payment of bills.
Motion to pay the bills?
Second.
Motion by Golembeski, second by Mataronis. Further discussion. Councilor Anderson.
Aye.
Golembeski.
Aye.
Mataronis.
Aye.
Moore.
Aye.
Motion aye. The motion carries. There being no further business, I do.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I declared it.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.